All right, Jason, if you could play any sport professionally, what would you choose? And I kind of want to know position. Like if you just said football, I'd want to know.
If I could play any sport, any position, what a loaded question. I mean, I got no preview on this. What would I love the most?
Right. In the experience of doing it, training for it, all that stuff.
You know, this is crazy. So probably my two passions right now would be CrossFit, obviously, and barefoot water skiing.
Okay.
So those come to mind. That would be so fun to do professionally.
Right.
But there's the payoff's not there.
Yeah.
So if I really want to do something that
Do you regularly barefoot water ski?
No, because I don't have a boat anymore.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But all someone has to do is provide the boat. I got the wetsuit ready.
Wow.
Jesse Alvarez almost got me a couple times last year and schedule fell through.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
But I think I'm going to go football and I think I'm going to go quarterback.
Okay.
That's just that would be it.
Yeah.
Baseball's never been my favorite sport, and basketball, professionally wise, just really doesn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. But, yep. What about you?
Yeah. I've always thought baseball. I just growing up, around Boston and Boston sports, I just had this love of the Red Sox, and then just like October and the coolness and just, the lights, and it would be sweet.
Yep.
Maybe like first base or something. I don't know. But hitting would probably be my biggest problem. I stopped in high school because, this is a funny story, but playing for our town, they required that you played on Sundays. And my parents were like, that was a hard, fast rule. So I got to let go.
What do you think Stevens would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably
wrestler?
Maybe. He watches a lot of football. He might want to. Okay.
He did attend professional wrestling when he was younger, though.
Wow.
Yeah. They even used it in a sermon illustration here. Kentucky, no, not the Kentucky Headhunters. That was a singing group. I can't remember who he said. He'll know when he listens to it. He's not able to be with us today.
That's right. All right, let's start. Welcome to the First Podcast, a podcast of First Baptist Church Lake Butler, where the pastors gather to encourage and equip our church to engage the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Pastor Jonathan. I'm here with Pastor Jason, and we love just kind of talking through issues that we find are helpful to digest a little bit more, to think through a little bit more carefully. And on Sunday, you preached this great sermon on something that might take some people by surprise.
Yeah.
It is the text in Revelation chapter 21 that describes the New Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And many, I would even venture to say, even in my own understanding in my life, I was surrounded by a lot of people who would point me to interpretations of taking these texts and these verses as a type of blueprint. This is exactly what it's going to look like. We could say the literal interpretation of what it is. And so you helped us see how it's better to understand it in more of a figurative way of what these symbols and images are really getting at, the real point by which John is using these in his text. So, yeah, why don't we talk through a little bit about what the city is and why it is the way that it is?
Yeah, talking about a new approach and trying to help our people with it. I know I was probably as apprehensive about this sermon as anything that, I've brought some new things to the members of First Baptist over the year, our doctrine of election, predestination, even how we're viewing things concerning the end time from an amillennial perspective, an idealist perspective. Man, our understanding of the tribulation and Antichrist, but still, I felt like just growing up here in the South, and this was going to be as new as anything our people had heard. And I will say, man, praise the Lord, I felt like people really received it well, but I am kind of looking at it like, how were they able to process that? And I know we're getting to that. But I just want to say, I think back to when we were in Wyoming, so however many years ago that was, and therefore it was a little bit before that, was when I got my first exposure to, I was listening to Vodi Balkam's series through Revelation, and he was preaching it symbolically and from the idealist perspective, and I was like, oh my goodness. It was like someone, like I'd gone from watching black and white TV to in color. It's like someone had flipped the switch on. I'm like, this makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. And so I've had, my goodness, 7 years to just kind of continue to develop this. So I have to remember other people haven't had 7 years to kind of see with this new lens. And so if anyone's out there just kind of saying, I'm glad you said that, because that was also brand new. But it did really seem to make sense. So let's see, Jonathan, if we can make a little bit more sense.
Let's do it. So here's my first question. Why, so this is verse 9, why would John say, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb, and then in the next verse say, and he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem? How are we to understand that? Does that kind of give us a little hint of how to interpret this text?
Yeah, if you're going where I think you're going with this, I feel like it introduces a metaphor.
Right.
And that is not uncommon to us. As we talked about in the sermon, God uses metaphors to describe the church, his people, as a building, as a vine and branches. What else? A temple, a household.
Right.
What's another one? I'm forgetting one. A body. That was it.
Oh, I thought you said that. Sorry.
One of those bees.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just saying, hey, I'm going to show you the people of God, and here's the metaphor I'm going to use. Glorious city.
Mm-hmm. And then as it's coming down, this city is coming down from heaven with this imagery of heaven, of course, is God's space where he dwells. So if it's coming down from heaven, we know this is God's plan. It's his doing. It has his presence stamped all over it. It's coming down from heaven, and we're told having the glory of God, verse 11, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper clear as crystal. So why do you think these pictures of jewelry and precious stones start getting used to describe this city?
Okay. First of all, before I get to that one, you mentioned something that I didn't mention in the sermon, coming down out of heaven from God. Contrast. There was a contrast there.
Right.
When you go back to Babel in Genesis 11, man was building a tower up to heaven, up to God. That's what man has been trying to do, build their own city for their own glory. And of course, we make that connection with the usage of Babylon in the book of Revelation. It's man's best effort to build themselves a city for their glory, which we saw destroyed in chapters 18 and 19. And now there's a city coming down out of heaven from God.
Right.
And there is a city, a people, a community of people that God is building.
Yes.
And we want to see that. And it's the people of that city, their names have been written in the Lamb's Book of Life from before the foundation of the world. The city that God's building, that's so sure, whom he foreknew, those whom he had given to the Son, and the Son came and purchased, and the Spirit called, and the Spirit sealed. Now you see the completion of this city of God coming down, having the glory of God, and back to what you said, and it's described as these precious jewels.
Right.
Maybe you want to answer your own question there.
Well, of course, even in our culture, precious stones and jewels are still valued, and they have a real worth. So in using those images, something really valuable, something really glorious, something really precious is being shown. And I don't know if you touched on this, but even in Genesis chapter 2, around the Garden of Eden, this river flows from Eden, and we're told that there is a place where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. And then we're told that onyx, and then is it bdellium? Is that right? Mm-hmm. That those precious stones are there as well. So even that little mention of precious stones and gold in the Garden of Eden, or coming from the Garden of Eden, here is being repeated to show us yet again this is a much better version of the Garden of Eden. It's something that there aren't just a few of these. It's everywhere. There's stones everywhere. I mean, the materials are proclaiming like this huge billboard that God has done something glorious, and what we are headed towards is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I tried to say a couple of times, when you are understanding, man, this isn't literal. So does this mean that there aren't these walls with all of these precious stones? Or you're telling me literally there aren't streets of gold? What we're trying to say is it's more than that.
Right.
What we understand as gold, what we understand as valuable, has only been a glimpse of what the glory and value will be of the place where God himself dwells.
Yeah.
You and I were talking a little bit before we started about what must it be like if you're actually dwelling in the presence of God. What kind of glory are we talking about? Far more glorious than what a stone can mean to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It expands. It doesn't limit. So an interpretation that just says, yep, there's going to be some pearl, like what that ends up doing is saying, well, yeah, pearl is great, but you can still put a price tag on pearls. What we're saying is that's getting at a much deeper reality, that everything about this city is spectacular, that God, because he is there, because his glory is there, it's going to look incredible. Like, even I think we're almost at the brink of where our language can fall short of describing. Like, yesterday, it was a beautiful day here in North Central Florida, and I was with Byron outside, my son, and we were just having fun. We were playing a little golf, and there was this breeze and the sunshine, and it was just like we had a great meal. I was almost overwhelmed, like kind of brought to tears of just like, God is just so good to have this moment right now in time. Imagine what it's going to be like to experience the goodness and blessing of God, but it's like 1,000 times.
Unfiltered.
In
its fullness.
I can't, really.
This is so crazy because yesterday, about 7:30, me and Burke, Berkeley's my golden doodle, if you don't know. Our job is to take the trash out.
Yeah.
And man, it was just that time of the day, like it had just cooled off a little bit and the wind was blowing. And I'm walking back and my thought was, my goodness, if this is this nice, what in the world would the new heaven and the new earth be like with God's very presence dwelling with me right now?
Right.
And that was exciting, man. That was exhilarating. And we're wanting to tell our listeners right now, when it said gold clear as glass, just think about that. Right now we understand gold and its value, but the best of gold on this earth is not clear as glass. What that's trying to say to us is what you're going to be experiencing living in the glory of God is beyond description. Anything that you could take to its ultimate value here. I think that's what's being said there, man. And you used a term earlier, sanctified imagination. I liked that, and I want to do that. Let's try to use our sanctified imagination. If you piled all of the most precious gems and stones and resources and painted the prettiest picture you could in human terms, then expand it to its fullness in shining forth the glory of God's presence.
Because all of this is really saying something about the character of God. When we read it closely, the city has God's glory, and that glory is radiating, which is then described like a most rare jewel. So it's so hard to even get our mind around what it's going to look like that God's glory is everywhere and known in a way that we've never experienced here on earth. Of course, we have the Spirit. Of course, we have God's people at church. We have seen evidences of God's glory everywhere. The skies are declaring it, as Psalm 19 points us to. But there's going to be a way in which we see God's character show forth just how amazing he is, how good he is, and how all of life is really best enjoyed in him. And it's just, to me, it just kind of leaves me a little bit speechless when we have days like yesterday. You see that sunset. We're brought to this point of like, man, that's beautiful. We're able to recognize the beauty of those things, which is why I think these pictures of jewels are being used to the ancient world and to us a little bit. That's like the highest form of beauty we could point to of what this world has to offer.
Yes.
And here we're being shown that God's glory is like that, and then even more so. So we're trying to see that God's character is just so amazing, and what is the future for believers is so incredible that it's even hard to fully grasp.
You're talking about a new experience of God's character. I'm getting ahead a little bit into our next section, but it says that there's no sun or moon in that city. Mm-hmm. Here where the people of God are dwelling with their God, there's no need for a sun because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the light.
Right.
The little illustration that I was reading when I was looking over this was, if you hold a candle out and then the sun comes up,
right?
You put the candle away because it's just totally outshone by the sun. And, whether you believe there's a literal sun in the new heaven and new earth or not, the point is,
right,
the glory of God is so bright in that city, which we believe is the fullness of the new heaven and new earth. Like, you don't need the sun. You've never seen such light as that. I'm telling you, when we see the person of God and the way he's going to manifest himself with his bride, his people, man, it's just indescribable.
Yeah. And the purpose of all creation, I'll just say this really quick, is that it all is pointing to him. It's not that we have this world with sun and moon and stars and galaxies and we have oxygen and the rules of thermodynamics, all that stuff. It's not that we have all of that and we're like, okay, now let's fit God kind of underneath those things. God made all of that so that we could understand, we recognize beauty, we have these needs. All of these things are actually ultimately pointing to him. We need the sun because he's the one who designed and created it. All of this stuff is going to forever just show us, man, it's all been from him and to him and through him. It's hard to believe.
It's really hard to believe that we're going to be there.
Yeah.
Isn't that glorious, man?
It is.
By God's grace, he has chosen and ordained and done it all to make us his people, to enjoy that forever. Praise the Lord. So here's a quick practical question.
Yep.
Okay, let's say our members out there and we're like, all right, Pastor Jason, we read it. I get it. I don't know if I understand all of it, but I think I'm with you. But what do I do about some of these things I've thought my whole life, or even songs that we sing about? Everybody says, I bet they're kicking up gold dust in heaven, or, walking on or in the gates of pearl, you know what I'm saying?
All that stuff.
Is that just gone? And answer that question. And then practically, what do we do with some of those songs? There's one I've actually been singing not too long ago. What was it? With gates of pearl and streets paved with gold. Yeah, it's called Land of Living. What do we do when we get to those points in the song?
Well, obviously, we don't know what heaven looks like currently, where we're going to go to be with God, because to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But I think what we do is we just affirm the language that's in here. So as far as it describes, like, it's going to be beautiful and glorious, I think there's a sense in which we can agree with saying streets of gold because it's mentioned here. But the point is not just that it's made of gold in the stone sense of real materials, but that it's pointing to something that is rich and glorious. And then, of course, as we want to mention, it's from the Old Testament. So there's a real point about it being where God's presence is that's much better than any kind of monetary value that gold has to offer.
Right. Would you say there's even a sense, because like you mentioned Genesis 2 earlier, that there were all of those precious resources and beautiful... Yeah. Man, when you talk about sanctified imagination, it might be that times 1,000.
Exactly. That's why I think I don't want to say I don't take this literally, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's much bigger than just simply, let's measure this out. Let's figure out what the gates look like. Let's think about the stones. You know, it's like, sure, but there's so much more to that imagery that unlocks that imagination of what's really the main point of why these things are here. And I love that you brought up, I mean, the dimensions of the city are a square, and the square that all Israelites would have known was the temple. The temple was this square. And then gold was such an important part of the temple, of it symbolizing not only of God's provision for his people to be able to build this grand thing, but of, you know, the purity and the grandeur of who God is. That gold isn't just sectioned off and put into one little space. That gold is the entire city. Mm-hmm. And so when you mentioned that in the sermon, to me, that's kind of the mic drop of what the New Jerusalem's going to be. It's like, oh, the whole point of using that imagery of gold is about getting God. We get to be in God's presence, and it's unmediated. It's fully ours because of what Christ has done. There's nothing standing in the way. Just like when Jesus died, that veil was torn in two. We get to now have this access, which is so cool. I mean, it's going to be perfect. And that's what we're made for.
Yeah. So, well, a couple of things. One, I wanted to go to the second thing, but I'm going to go back and hit this. Just while we're talking about literal and symbolic, and certainly, you know, guys who are smarter than me, guys who are better pastors than me, do give literal interpretations, and I respect that. Mm-hmm. But when I was studying, you know, one of the things, practically speaking, is if you took that literally, the walls would be of the city, or the city, should I say, is 1,460 miles high. Mount Everest, right, highest mountain in the world. I said in the U.S. the other day. Jonathan said in the world. I'm like, yeah, you know what I mean. 6 miles above sea level. So we're talking 1,460 miles high if we took that literally.
Yeah.
The wall, it says, is 144 cubits. Mm-hmm. That's 72 yards. 72 yards. If we're taking that literal, that's a really, really high city for such a small wall. Mm-hmm. And then even if you tried to make it 72 yards wide, you're still looking at a building that's way too big for a wall to sit on that's 72 yards wide. Not to mention, if you just live as humans on the floor level of a city that's 1,460 miles high, there's just a lot of unused space. You know, we made our case symbolically, but when you do start really taking things literally, you really have some questions that you have to answer. Okay, moving on from that, there was something else that I didn't cover. I mean, I only had 46 minutes to work with, right?
Right.
And that is, John was taking a lot of his stuff from the Old Testament. This had been spoken about before. Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Ezekiel talks about a temple that is coming. So this would be the third temple after the second temple is destroyed. And it's fair to say that there are a lot of interpretations as to what that temple is referring to. Some people think that it's already been built. Some people think it's still to be built in the future. And what we want to do is we want to, of course, read those chapters in a way that's faithful to what Ezekiel's getting at. But then when we look closely at that temple, we see that in chapter 40, verse 2, Ezekiel describes this temple, that it's shaped like a city, that this temple is like a city. So it's like already putting the foundation down of saying there's going to be a type of city temple that is coming. And then on top of that, Ezekiel's temple and the boundaries of Jerusalem are roughly the same size. So it's like this expanding of the temple, which has been, of course, from the beginning, the goal of Eden, to expand and continue to build God's presence everywhere. And then, just like in this end time temple in Revelation 21, there are lots of things about Israel's temple that are not there, like the bronze basin, the golden lampstand, the table of showbread. So leaving those things out, I think, make the Israelites in that time, to which Ezekiel was writing, say like, something's going to be different about this temple. What's going to be happening? And then so if we fast forward through the history of God's people, then here comes John, who's in exile, writing this. And he's like, man, that temple that Ezekiel wrote about, man, there's going to be coming this temple. This is, from God's revelation to him, that will be a full city. And here are the exact dimensions. And it just lines up to the point where I think Ezekiel's just trying to show us. It just lines up to the point where I think John is trying to show us that Ezekiel's temple was always pointing towards this temple that is coming, which is going to be a city, and that it's going to be everywhere. And yeah, I think that's important to then kind of link those two things.
Yeah, and we've done that all through Revelation, how it has its Old Testament counterpart, like it was being prefigured, foreshadowed, shown, and here's the fulfillment of it. And I think, and I read this in a commentary, so I don't want to act like I found this on my own, but the last thing that's said about this temple, that's a city in the book of Ezekiel, it ends with, and the name of the city from that day shall be Yahweh is there.
That's right.
And that's the whole point of John's description of the city, the final temple. God's there. That really helps us connect that, man, that's the temple, the dwelling place that Ezekiel saw.
Yeah. Right. And so the connections are God's presence are both in Ezekiel's temple and in, of course, Revelation 21 in that temple, that the temple is called, or the city in Revelation 21 are called the people of God. And then in Ezekiel 47, I have here in my notes, that all nations are present. And then all nations are present in chapter 21, verses 24 through 27.
That's right.
So there's this, I think, very strong argument to be made that what Ezekiel was seeing maybe a little bit cloudily, John is then providing in
clarity.
Yeah, exactly. From cloudy to clarity. Yeah.
Cloudily.
Cloudily. I think that's a word. Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We're kind of course, we've got one more section that we're going to get to develop this in the sermon series, but just for people today, making some application.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, anytime we go on a trip or a vacation, we like to envision what it's going to be like. You start thinking about that condo on the beach or the mountains where you're going, whatever it is. For the Christian, we have to have a view of heaven to motivate us day in and day out. And I think that this type of stuff, like, blows up our expectations of heaven. It's going to show us again and again that what we are heading towards is perfection. It's life with God, life as it always should have been.
Yeah.
And the more that we experience God, the more, I just love, there's this band called Citizens, and they have this line in one of their songs that he says, I can't find the edges of you. Because there's no end to God. He's infinite. And the more that we enjoy him and we are in the light of his presence, the more I think that we long for him. And the more that we realize, like, this is what life has always been about. They have, the band Citizens, in one of their songs, they say, this is about heaven. He says, so many thoughts in my head, like, will we ever get tired of laughing? Or will we still go to bed? Or just stay up with you all life dancing? I love that. Like, instead of all night is all life. Like, it is going to be this type of life that it's really hard for us to imagine today because we still have the presence of sin in our lives. But one day that presence is going to be gone. So that's, I think, the mental image that this is helping to shape, which is part of, I think, how it impacts our lives.
Yeah. Will you send those words to me and I'll use them in the next sermon and tell them God gave it to me?
Yeah, sure.
And I just think about this city is being contrasted with another city. And I think about the original audience that John's writing to, man, and they were just living in Babylon, and he's just encouraging, like, don't in unbelief make your citizenship in Babylon, in this world. There is a city whose builder and maker is God. And so I would say, just to all of us, man, let's persevere. Let this be what motivates us to carry on in faith.
Amen. Well, thanks for this conversation. I think it's a good tack on to your sermon. If you haven't heard the sermon, I'll put a little link down there in the show notes for you to make sure you can hear that one for a full treatment of this text. But yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys listening to this episode of the First Podcast. Until next time, for your joy and God's glory.